A billionaire COO is enjoying a moment at the playground, observing his son, when a little boy approaches him and says, "Hey, sir, is this? Your son resembles me perfectly." The billionaire gazes down at the boy with a smile, pauses when he sees his reflection as the sun shines brilliantly in the late afternoon sky, casting a warm golden glow over the city park, filled with children's laughter, echoed through the air, blending beautifully with the rhythmic squeak of swings and the cheerful hum of conversations from scattered groups of parents. Marcus Langford stood near the edge of the playground, hands tucked in his tailored blazer with pockets. He stood out as a unique presence among the casual crowd in their sneakers and windbreakers. With polished shoes firmly planted on the bar-covered ground, Marcus shifted his gaze to his 6-year-old son Elliot, who was joyfully climbing the vividly colored jungle gym. His little hands grasped the bars with determination, his messy brown hair falling into his eyes. Marcus felt a little twinge of guilt, but it was a great opportunity to bring Elliot to the park or anywhere special. His life as SE of Langford Enterprises was challenging, but it also offered great opportunities and growth. There was limited space for anything else, but Elliot had been adamant, and Marcus, in spite of his. Despite the packed schedule, he found it hard to say no as he glanced at his phone. Habitually checking for missed emails or urgent messages, the screen remained blank, and for once, everything seemed calm. He slid the device back into his pocket and turned his attention to Elliot, who had just reached the top of the structure and was waving with great enthusiasm. Marcus waved back, his lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. "Hey, sir," a small, cheerful voice chimed beside him, causing Marcus to turn, startled. Discover another boy standing there. He appeared to be around Elliot's age, with a round face, sparkling brown eyes, and hair so strikingly similar to Elliot's that Marcus blinked in confusion. The boy grinned up at him, his cheeks slightly flushed. "Flushed from play, is this your son?" the boy asked, pointing to Elliot, who was now clambering down the jungle gym. "He resembles me perfectly." Marcus paused, his gaze filled with wonder, snapping between the boy in front of him and Elliot, who was joyfully bounding toward them with an excited bounce in his step. The resemblance was striking. It felt as if I was gazing at Elliot's mirror image or his twin. Elliot skidded to a stop beside them, his face beaming with joy when he saw the other boy. Exclaimed, "Whoa, you look just like me." His eyes were wide with wonder. Two boys stood side by side, their similarities shining brightly, from their identical mop of brown hair to the same curious tilt of their heads. They could have been carbon copies of each other. Marcus felt a flutter in his stomach. A nod. "What's your name?" Elliot asked, leaning closer to the boy with curiosity, inspecting his reflection. "I'm Jake," the boy replied with a bright, toothy smile. "What's yours, Elliot?" "That's my dad." Elliot jabbed a thumb toward Marcus, beaming with pride. "What about you? Where's your dad?" Jake's expression brightened for a moment before he shrugged. "I don't have a dad. It's just me and my mom." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. Despite the words, he felt a sense of lightness that contrasted with the gravity of the situation. What he just said made the boy look back at Marcus, his bright eyes filled with innocent curiosity. "You really are my twin," Elliot declared, grabbing Jake's arm with a sense of excitement, as if claiming him as a long-lost friend. Brother Jake laughed, the sound contagious. And soon both boys were giggling, celebrating their similarities even more. It was evident when they stood so close together, yet Marcus found it hard to laugh. He sensed a change in the ground beneath him, and his eyes eagerly searched Jake's face. For an explanation he couldn't yet articulate about who this child was and why. Did he resemble Elliot so much? A voice interrupted Jake's racing thoughts. "There you are." Marcus turned to see a woman walking briskly toward them. She looked determined and full of energy, was dressed simply in jeans and a light jacket, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Her face, though lined with faint traces of exhaustion, felt surprisingly familiar as his breath hitched in recognition. As everything clicked into place, Sarah's mom called Jake over, waving excitedly. "Look at this boy. It looks just like me. Isn't that amazing?" Sarah froze mid-step, her eyes locking with Marcus. Her expression sparkled with a blend of surprise and something more profound. With a hint of hesitation, she swiftly moved closer, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Hi," she said with a warm smile, her gaze brightening. Darting between Marcus and Elliot, I was pleasantly surprised to see you here, Sarah. Marcus managed his voice barely above a whisper, a whirlwind of emotions swirling with excitement. Within him, a mix of surprise and curiosity stirred as Jake looked on. Look at us, Mom. We totally look like twins. Isn't that amazing? Sarah beamed, her grip on Jake tightening slightly. It's definitely. It was surprising. She said in a neutral tone, Come on, Jake, we should get going. But Jake expressed his desire to play with Elliot. But she gently suggested maybe another time, gently guiding him away. As the evening was drawing near, Marcus took a step forward. With a natural urge to intervene, Sarah called out, Wait. As she turned back, her eyes narrowing with determination. Not here, Marcus, she said quietly, her voice carrying a sense of closure. Another word, she guided Jake toward the parking lot. Her posture confident. Watch them go, his mind racing and his heart pounding with excitement as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. He turned to Elliot, still gazing after Jake with a blend of admiration and a hint of longing, said, tugging, Can Jake come over to play sometime? He's like my brother Marcus. Swallowed hard, searching for the right words. We'll see, he said, his voice filled with determination as they left. In the park, Marcus felt a sense of curiosity about Jake's face and the look in Sarah's eyes. There was a mystery to unravel, and he was eager to figure it out. Couldn't overlook the intriguing feeling that there was more to this story than mere chance resemblance for the first time in years. Marcus noticed a small crack in the carefully constructed life he built, and he couldn't help but wonder about the past he thought he had left it behind, but it was about to come rushing back. The drive home from the park was unusually quiet. Elliot sat in the back seat, his face pressed against the window, watching the city pass by. Normally, he would be bubbling over with excitement after an afternoon of play. But today he was a bit quieter, with Marcus glancing at him looking in the rearview mirror. There was a sense of uncertainty, but Dad, Elliot finally spoke up, breaking the silence. Do you think Jake and I are truly twins? We look so much alike. Same. Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel. I don't know, buddy. Maybe you just met. Sometimes someone who resembles you appears, and it can be quite intriguing. Elliot frowned, but there's always a silver lining to every situation. Curious about the answer, but it's interesting, right? I mean, he even has a unique way of speaking. Just like me. Marcus didn't reply. He was caught up in his thoughts, reliving that moment with a sense of wonder. He'd seen Jake for the first time, and the thrill of recognition surged through him like an electric current, igniting a spark of excitement. Sarah's appearance had only added to the intrigue. It had been years since he last saw her. The familiarity in her eyes, combined with the guarded tension, surprised him more than he anticipated when they got home. Elliot quickly dashed upstairs to his room, leaving Marcus in the peaceful house. He loosened his tie and settled into the leather armchair in the living room, gazed at the coffee table, inviting thoughts that swirled around, leading him back to a chapter of his life he'd long since buried. It had been nearly 7 years since he'd last seen Sarah, and they met during a business trip to a charming coastal town where Marcus was engaging in exciting negotiations for the acquisition of a promising tech startup. Sarah had worked at a local art gallery, her vibrant energy a delightful contrast to the routine of boardrooms. Spreadsheets for a delightful moment. Marcus had allowed himself to wander. In her world, she was truly one of a kind, unlike anyone he had ever encountered, grounded, creative, and full of potential, unafraid to challenge him. But their relationship blossomed and then transformed as quickly as it began. With Marcus's growing responsibilities at Langford Enterprises took him in a different direction, and Sarah, eager to embrace her own journey, decided to move forward with optimism. He hadn't challenged her decision back then. His career had appeared more significant than anything else. He contemplated what he might have overlooked in the aftermath. Their separation seems to have a timing that feels too perfect to be a coincidence, especially considering Jake's age and his remarkable qualities. The similarity to Elliot and Sarah's reaction at the park suggested a connection that Marcus was excited to explore. The next morning, Marcus found it challenging to concentrate at work as numbers and contracts danced around in his mind, his thoughts swirling with possibilities. Back to Jake by noon. He felt a strong urge for answers and found himself returning to the park was alive with energy. As I scanned the playground, eagerly searching for any sign of Jake or Sarah in the vibrant area. It was quieter than the day before, but after a few minutes, he spotted them. Sarah was sitting on a bench under a tree, happily reading. As Marcus took a deep breath, he approached while Jake enjoyed his time on the swings, and a book rested in his hands. With a sense of anticipation, Sarah noticed him right away, her body tingling with excitement as he drew closer. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm yet cautious. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to talk to you," he said, glancing at Jake, who was joyfully swinging higher and higher. "Yesterday," she let out a sigh as she closed her book and set it aside. "I thought you might." Sarah Marcus started to lower her voice, her eyes sharpening as she spoke about Jake's father. "That's not something you need to worry about, but it seems like it is," Marcus said, gesturing toward. "Jake looks just like Elliot. Don't you think I deserve an explanation, Sarah?" She paused, her fingers gently holding the edge of the bench. "What would you like me to say?" "Marcus, life is filled with wonderful coincidences. And it's amazing how kids can resemble each other." He said firmly that if they're not related, he doesn't believe in coincidences, especially not when the resemblance is truly remarkable. And he paused, searching her face for confirmation. "We were together around the time Jake would have been born." Sarah's expression shifted, revealing a brief moment of vulnerability. "Marcus, if this isn't the right place for our conversation, let's find the perfect spot to chat," he said, his tone softening. "I'm here to help, not to make this difficult for you." "Sarah, I just need to understand." She glanced toward Jake, who had slowed his pace, swinging and now watching them with curiosity. She said after a long pause, "Let's meet at the cafe on 5th Street tomorrow morning, and I'll share all the details. What I can, but not here." Marcus nodded, sensing that it might be best to take a step back for now. It would only lead to more challenges. "Thank you." The next morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe early. His nerves simmered beneath his composed exterior as he found a table in the corner. He ordered coffee, his gaze eagerly fixed on the door when Sarah walked in. With a cautious expression, she took a seat across from him as he stood to greet her, with her hands folded on the table. He said to Sarah with a gentle tone, "Let's get this started. Is Jake my son?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, he felt a flicker of hope that she might agree. "Answer." Then she exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I don't know," she said, admitted, but it's possible. Maris stared at her, the weight of her words settling in a way that felt hopeful. "After we ended things," she nodded, "and I discovered I was pregnant. There's a chance for new beginnings. I didn't reach out because you had already moved on, and honestly, I didn't think you'd want to know." "That's not fair," Marcus said, his voice full of emotion. With a hint of frustration, "You didn't even give me a chance." "Maybe not," Sarah said quietly, "but I had my reasons, and now here we are." Marcus leaned back in his chair, embracing the challenge ahead. "Process everything, and as for Jake, does he know anything?" "No," she said quickly, "he doesn't. It's just been the two of us. And that's created a unique bond between us." Marcus's mind buzzed with excitement. If Jake was his son, that meant Elliot had a brother, a twin. The thought was both exhilarating and wonderfully overwhelming. "Marcus," Sarah said, interrupting his thoughts, "I hope Jake stays safe. If you're considering stepping into his life, it's important to be mindful. Consider the implications of that statement." "I have no intention of causing him any harm," Marcus said. "I'm determined, and I can't walk away from this, Sarah. Not until I uncover the truth." Studied him for a long moment, as if seeking to understand his sincerity at last. She nodded with a smile and said, "All right. If you're serious about this, let's figure it out together." Together, Marcus nodded, his resolve strengthening as he embraced the uncertainty of the path ahead. One thing was certain. His life was on the brink of exciting changes he couldn't yet imagine. The cafe was quiet as Marcus sat, ready for what was to come. Alone, gazing at the half-empty coffee cup in front of him. His conversation with Sarah danced in his mind, replaying her hesitant words over and over. "I don't know, no, but it could be possible." The ambiguity surrounded him. He found himself wondering what he had anticipated. Perhaps a clear answer, a denial, or even a spark of anger. But instead, he found himself in a state of uncertainty, open to possibilities about what Jake might be feeling or thinking. His son, and while uncertainty tangled his thoughts, there was Elliot, blissfully unaware of the storm, brewing just beneath the surface of his father's carefully constructed life. Marcus rubbed his temples and leaned in, ready to embrace whatever came next. Back in his chair, reflecting on the memories of his past with Sarah, it had been years since he allowed himself to think about her, but now the floodgates were open, and every detail came rushing back with a sense of warmth and possibility. Came rushing back. He joyfully met Sarah during what he now fondly calls the early days. Then Marcus was still on his journey to becoming the polished, sharp-suited SEAL he is today. Ambitious, indeed, young, scrappy, and still passionately fighting to build his company. Life had been a whirlwind of meetings, late nights, and endless networking, but meeting Sarah felt like a delightful breakthrough. Pause button for the first time they met by chance at an art gallery fundraiser he had attended with an open heart. Interest, she stood out from anyone he'd ever known, warm, vibrant, and full of life. Her passion for her work shone through, and he fondly recalled how she playfully teased him about his lack of artistic knowledge while she guided him through the gallery. Her laugh light and carefree. She had a way of making the world feel brighter. For months, Marcus had discovered comfort in their relationship. Sarah introduced a harmony to his life that he hadn't recognized he was missing. He recalled delightful weekends spent exploring the city together, sharing their dreams and enjoying laughter over coffee made him feel grounded, human in a way his work never could. And while the cracks had begun to show, there's always room for growth and improvement ahead. When his company Langford Enterprises began to soar, the demands on his time moved forward, and although Sarah made every effort to be supportive, she found herself feeling a bit frustrated with his frequent absence. Marcus, motivated by his determination to succeed, had always assured her that everything would fall into place after the next big deal, but the night she left was etched in his mind, a moment that stood out vividly. They had a disagreement over dinner once more, with Sarah expressing her frustrations. He prioritized his career over her, and Marcus, feeling defensive and exhausted, said something he quickly wished he could take back. "Knew what you were signing up for," he snapped. "This is who I am." Sarah had gone quiet, her eyes full of hurt. "I thought I was signing up for you, Marcus, not your." By the next morning, she had moved on, leaving behind a brief note on his kitchen counter expressing gratitude for the memories while acknowledging she needed to step out of his shadow. Marcus had felt heartbroken, yet there was a sense of hope for the future. He channeled his energy into work, believing it was the best path forward, as their lives were simply two. It's fascinating to see how things can come together in unexpected ways, revealing insights that were previously unknown. Sinking feeling was that Sarah had been expecting when she walked out of his life, and he had created a situation that made it quite challenging for her to connect with him in the months following their breakup. Marcus had transformed his phone number and relocated to a new city for work, embracing a fresh start and new opportunities ahead. It wasn't intentional, at least not in the sense of running away from Sarah, but it certainly felt that way. And now Jake. There was a bright and joyful little boy who resembled his son perfectly in the timeline. Fit too perfectly to ignore, and Marcus couldn't help but dream about the exciting possibilities ahead. The one question lingered in his mind. He cared for him more than anyone else. How could he not have known? The thought stirred something within him. He took great pride in being in control and knowing everything there was to know about his world, and yet here he was, surprised by something so significant, something that could transform everything. The striking similarity between Jake and Elliot added another layer of complexity. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the. He sat at the table and pulled out his phone, scrolling through his photo gallery with excitement until he discovered a recent picture of Elliot. Captured during a family vacation, his son was beaming with joy, his face adorned with ice cream, a delightful symbol of carefree childhood joy. He thought of Jake at the park, standing beside Elliot, sharing wonderful moments together. Smile almost enchanting in its similarity, the possibility that they were more than just siblings, that they might. The idea of being twins made his head spin. The word felt strange and foreign, but also exciting. It was true. How had it happened? Why had Sarah raised one child while the other ended up in his care? He couldn't quite imagine the possibilities. Sarah is choosing to let go of a child, having experienced the joy of knowing him, just like the first time Marcus held Elliot as a baby. He had experienced a profound sense of love and responsibility that he embraced wholeheartedly. The adoption process with the agency was thorough and professional, sharing Elliot's story in a way that made him believe he was giving a child a second chance, and now he was curious about the possibilities that lay ahead. There was definitely more to that story than he had been told. Marcus ran a hand over his face, with his mind racing. He was eager for answers and knew that he wouldn't discover them by lingering in the past. He was ready to move forward, reconnect with Sarah to uncover the complete story about Jake Elliott and the choices she made in the past. As he stood to leave, his phone buzzed with a notification, a message from his assistant reminding him of a meeting later that afternoon. The demands of his work pressed against him, but for the first time in years, they felt manageable. Small in the grand scheme of what he was facing now, he made a decision right then and there. He wasn't going to let the past stay an enigma as he had dedicated too much time to the less important matters, and Marcus stepped out of the cafe into the crisp morning air, ready to embrace new possibilities. With a sense of determination settling over him, he embraced the unknown future, confident in one thing. Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to move forward. He couldn't wait any longer. Questions that had been swirling in his mind since the cafe were significant and important to address. He was eager for answers, and he cherished them now. Every memory of Sarah, every glance at Elliot's face, and the moment he spent replying to Jake's words only heightened his excitement. It was no longer. It was all about curiosity and the exciting journey of understanding the truth and its significance for everyone involved that he discovered. Sarah at the cafe where she worked was a small, cozy place tucked in a serene corner of the city, away from the lively chaos of Marcus's everyday life. He caught a glimpse of her through the window. Moving behind the counter, her expression was calm and focused as she brewed coffee and engaged in cheerful conversation with customers for a moment. He paused, contemplating whether he might disrupt the delicate harmony she had created, but then he considered. Jake and Elliot shared their matching grins, and the way they had instantly clicked made it impossible for him to walk away. Not now, especially with the cafe buzzing with energy. During the quiet moment, Marcus stepped inside, and Sarah looked up with a smile. The moment her eyes met his, her expression transformed. The calmness faded, replaced with a sense of anticipation. She gently set down the coffee pot she had been holding and walked around the counter toward him. "Marcus," she said, her voice filled with warmth. His voice was low but steady. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he replied, matching the tone. "Quiet, please." She glanced at the clock and then nodded toward a small table in the room, in the corner. With just 10 minutes to spare, Marcus followed her, feeling a flutter in his chest. They sat across from each other, ready for what was to come. The tiny table between them feeling like both a barrier and a bridge. Sarah folded her hands, her posture. "Curious?" she inquired, though her tone hinted that she already had an idea of what I needed. To discover the truth, Marcus spoke with a steady yet gentle tone regarding Jake. Elliot reflected on what transpired after we concluded our relationship, while Sarah gazed downward at her. Her fingers twisted together for a long moment, and she remained silent. Yet there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Marcus felt a twinge of worry that she might shut him out again, but then she sighed, her shoulders relaxing just a bit. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" she asked softly. "No," he admitted. "I can't." She nodded as if she understood. She had anticipated that response, and with a smile, she said, "You deserve to know." She paused for a moment, considering her words, gathering her thoughts before finally beginning. "After we parted ways, I discovered I was pregnant. But I didn't share the news because you had already moved on, and I felt it was best to keep it to myself. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me anymore. So I believed I made the right choice in letting you go." Marcus's stomach twisted at her words, but he remained quiet, allowing her to continue when the moment arrived. "I discovered I was having twins," she said, her voice filled with a hint of excitement. "It was quite a challenge, but I was determined and hopeful despite not having much money. I reminded myself that I would find a way to make it work and that I would accomplish what I set out to do. Whatever it took to raise them both." Her gaze dropped, and Marcus could see the determination shining through her expression. "But things took an unexpected turn," she said with a hint of hope. "The delivery had its challenges. But that's part of the journey. Wasn't in great health, but after they were born, the doctors told me it would be a long road to recovery, and I struggling to take care of myself. But I know I can rise to the challenge of 2 newborns." Marcus felt a mix of emotions in his chest. his heart longing for the version of Sarah he hadn't been there to support. The hospital proposed an open adoption. She continued, her voice filled with hope. They told me it would give one of the babies a chance at a stable life. There was something I couldn't commit to back then, and I really didn't want to go through with it. Marcus. It was tough. My heart. And yet I couldn't see another way. Marcus leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Above a whisper, Elliot. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. He was the... I often thought about him every day after that, hoping he was okay and surrounded by love. But I was curious about where he ended up. Her words resonated with me. Marcus, like a tidal wave, embraced the challenge of processing what she was saying, piecing it all together. Of the puzzle clicking into place with wonderful clarity when I adopted Elliot. He mentioned gradually that the agency informed him he had been abandoned. That was all the information they provided. Was completely unaware that he had a family, including you. Sarah's expression was quite telling. Experienced a blend of surprise and a touch of sadness. I didn't realize it was you either. I realized it only when I spotted you at the park, and then hearing Elliot's voice made it even clearer. Feeling down, she turned her gaze, her eyes fluttering quickly. Marcus settled back, feeling the heaviness of the revelation settling over him was that Elliot wasn't just a boy he had taken in out of a sense of duty and love. He was his biological son, and Jake was his twin. I can't believe this, Marcus said, running a hand through his hair. All these years, I had no idea. Neither did I, Sarah said. It's amazing to think that our paths have crossed again. And I'm excited about what this means. They sat in silence for a moment, the significance of the situation creating a palpable energy in the air. Marcus looked at Sarah, recognizing her not just as the woman he had once loved, but as someone who had bravely faced unimaginable challenges. In the midst of hardship, he felt a pang of guilt, contemplating how things might have turned out differently if he had stayed, if he had been there when she needed him most. What happens now? Sarah asked finally. With a voice just above a whisper, Marcus met her gaze, his determination strengthening. I may not have all the answers, but I do know this. I'm here to stay. And I'm not walking away from Jake, not at all. From Elliot and not from this. Sarah observed him intently for a long moment as if, after considering his words, she decided to nod, even though her expression still held a hint of caution. That's great, she said. If you're truly committed to being a part of their lives. It's important to recognize that this will be a challenge, but with the right mindset, we can navigate it together. Jake may not fully grasp the situation yet, and neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Marcus mentioned cutting her off gently, and while I know this won't be easy, I'm hopeful for what comes next. I'm determined to ensure they discover the truth and connect with each other in the way they truly deserve. Deserve to know the whole story. Sarah nodded again. And while the weight of the situation was evident in her eyes, there was a sense of hope in the air. Take it one step at a time, she said, for their sake. Marcus exhaled, feeling both hopeful and determined. With a mix of relief and excitement, the path ahead was filled with possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly moving forward. In the right direction. As he left the cafe, his thoughts were a vibrant whirlwind of emotion. One thing truly shone through. He was determined to ensure his sons would grow up together. They were family, and he was committed to that bond. Was determined to ensure they understood it. The days following Marcus' conversation with Sarah were filled with a vibrant whirlwind of emotions. He found himself reflecting on her words, the quiet pain she expressed, and the difficult choice she had to confront. Every time he looked at Elliot, he saw not only his son, but also the child Sarah had bravely let go. And then there was Jake, who was joyfully playing soccer and building Lego towers just a few miles away, completely immersed in his fun. The story that connected him to Marcus and Elliot was overwhelming, but Marcus felt a strong urge to reach out to Sarah once more, to grasp the significance of her choice. The initial discussion revolved around the details of unraveling the enigma. This time, he was eager to hear her side and understand the emotional journey she had faced. They met again at the cafe, this time after hours, when Sarah had finished her shift. The soft lighting and gentle hum of the coffee machines created. In a cozy cocoon of privacy, Sarah sat across from him, her hands gently cradling a warm mug of tea. Her expression was both thoughtful and welcoming. I need to understand what Sarah. Marcus said about his voice. It may be low, but it's steady. I'm eager to understand how you arrived at that decision and what the experience was like for you. Sarah's fingers gently curled around her mug, her gaze captivated by the rising steam. Did you really think I wanted to give up my son? She asked, her voice filled with a mix of determination and hope. Marcus expressed that he didn't believe it was an easy choice at all. Gently, that's why I want to understand. I need to. She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, shimmering with unshed tears. Can you imagine the overwhelming joy of holding two babies in your arms, even if the situation feels challenging? Keep them both in mind, knowing that no matter what happens, one of them will grow up without you. Mark Maris shook his head. His throat felt tight, and Sarah sighed, her shoulders drooping after. They were born during a time when I was facing challenges physically, emotionally, and financially, but I knew that brighter days were ahead. I left the doctors with the wonderful news that I was lucky to be alive after the delivery, and every time I looked at them, I felt a surge of determination about how I was going to give them the life they truly deserved. Her voice, though shaky, carried a sense of hope. And she paused to steady herself when the hospital social worker approached me with the idea of adoption. She mentioned that it would provide one of them with stability, a home, everything I couldn't offer back then. I found it hard to accept, and it brought me to tears. I spent days contemplating it, but ultimately, I reassured myself that it was for the best. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the table. You did what you thought was right, he said gently. You were trying to protect them. Sarah nodded. And though her expression showed some concern, there was a sense of hope in her eyes. I was uncertain about who would adopt him and where he would end up, but I reassured myself. I had come to terms with it, yet thoughts of him always lingered during every birthday and each milestone Jake achieved. Thought about his brother and hoped he was doing well. I was curious if he was finding joy. Marcus felt a sudden wave of guilt washed over him as he recalled Elliot's childhood, the joyful birthday parties, the fun vacations, and the peaceful moments they shared. Nights reading bedtime stories, he always believed he was giving Elliot everything he needed. And now he discovered the vastness of the picture he had been overlooking, and then Sarah continued. Her voice softened when I saw you at the park and when I saw Elliot. It felt like a wonderful moment. The universe seemed to have a peculiar sense of humor. Out of all the people who could have adopted him, it had to be you. Marcus flinched at the thought. The sharpness in her tone, I didn't know Sarah, he said softly when the agency. They reached out to me and shared that he was abandoned, and I truly believed I was making the right choice. Providing a child with a home is a beautiful journey. She looked at him, her gaze filled with intensity. He didn't realize he was yours. Marcus nodded, a sense of understanding dawning on him. I could have figured out the timing, the resemblance, and everything else. It's all coming together now. How could you have? Sarah asked, her tone softening slightly. You didn't know I was being pregnant. You might not have seen the connections, but that doesn't take away from the journey ahead. Marcus shared that he has dedicated the last 6 years to raising Elliot. And he has never once questioned where he came from. I should have known there was more to the story. Sarah studied him for the moment. Her expression was unreadable. Remember, you're not alone in feeling guilty, Marcus. I shared a piece of my heart the day I let Elliot go, and now, knowing he's been with you all this time, it's a journey to understand. Marcus struggled to process everything, feeling a lump rise in his throat as he noticed the pain around him. In her eyes, the promise of a decision she'd carried all these years sparkled with possibility. He thought of how wonderfully different things might have been. If only they had remained together. Perhaps things would have turned out differently. I wish I could have been there for them. He said quietly, I wish I'd known. Perhaps things could have turned out differently. Perhaps Sarah expressed her feelings, but we have a bright future ahead of us. All we can do now is figure out how to move forward. Marcus nodded, though the path ahead seemed challenging. But he reflected on Jake and Elliot and the unique worlds they had created. About to collide, there was no way to shield them from the truth. But he believed that in the end it would lead them to a brighter outcome, closer rather than driving them apart. Thank you for telling me, he said after a long pause. I know it wasn't easy, Sarah smiled gently, even if it didn't fully reach her eyes. I've held on to this secret for quite a while, Marcus. Perhaps it's time to embrace a new beginning. As they left the cafe, Marcus felt a unique blend of relief and a touch of sadness. He now appreciated the profound nature of Sarah's sacrifice. The challenging decision she had encountered, and the subtle resilience it had revealed. Taken to let Elliot go. But with that understanding came a profound sense of responsibility. He was not only Elliot's father, but also Jake's. And he was determined to discover a solution that would benefit not only the Bow boys, but also Sarah and himself, as well as the delicate connection of family they were working to strengthen. In the days following his second conversation with Sarah, Marcus felt the weight of his newfound reality settled into his chest. Jake and Elliot were more than just two boys who happened to look alike. They were twin brothers who had spent their lives apart without realizing it. And the thought filled him with both amazement and a sense of wonder. He was excited to take action on this revelation. The boys deserved to know each other, and he was committed to making it happen. Things unfold, and it wasn't solely focused on the boys. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Reflected on the quiet strength she had demonstrated in making a challenging decision. About the years she'd spent carrying that weight alone, he owed her more than gratitude. He owed her an opportunity to rebuild what had been lost. The first step Marcus decided was to bring the boys together in a way that felt natural, gently guiding them without revealing too much too soon. He called Sarah one afternoon. His tone was thoughtfully balanced. "I'd love to arrange some playdates for Jake and Elliot," he said. "I believe it's important. It's wonderful for them to spend time together, even if they don't know the full story yet." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Before Sarah responded, "You really think that's a good idea?" Marcus said, "I do." They clicked instantly at the park. "I believe they'll have a wonderful time." Sarah hesitated, and Marcus could sense her protective instincts bubbling to the surface. "Right," she said finally. "But let's approach this with care, Marcus. I want to make sure Jake is okay. We'll be careful," and Marcus reassured her that the first play date will be a gentle one. It was arranged for a Saturday afternoon at Marcus's house. Elliot was excited about the idea of having Jake over and spent. In the morning, Marcus was bouncing around the house, eagerly preparing his toys and games for when Jake and Sarah arrived. He greeted them, picking up on the tension in Sarah's stance. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was low. "I know this isn't easy." Sarah offered a small smile, her eyes shining with hope. Flicking toward Jake, who was already bounding into the house with Elliot, she said simply, "I'm just here for him." Boys vanished into Elliot's room, their joyful laughter resonating down the hallway as they plunged into a world of toys and imagination. Marcus and Sarah sat in the living room, the sound of their laughter breaking the ice between them. "Incredible together," Marcus said after a while, gesturing toward the hallway. It was as if they had known each other forever. And Sarah nodded, her expression brightening. "It's fascinating, isn't it? How natural it feels, as if they're completing something that's been missing." For the next few hours, Marcus happily observed Jake and Elliot played together, building forts and chasing each other through the backyard. Their bond was as effortless as ever. If they were drawn to one another by some unspoken understanding, it filled Marcus with a sense of joy and fulfillment. By the time Sarah gathered Jake to leave, the boys were eagerly asking for another playdate with Marcus, and Sarah exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. "We will. Let's plan something soon," Marcus said with a smile at Jake and Elliot. "I promise." In the next few weeks, playdates blossomed into a delightful routine, and sometimes they gathered at Marcus's house. At other times, Sarah hosted at her small but cozy apartment, and the boys formed an even stronger bond. With each visit, their similarities became increasingly evident. They shared a delightful love for puzzles, an uncanny connection, a wonderful ability to complete each other's thoughts, and a shared love for dinosaurs that resulted in countless hours of joyful roaring. And having a fun time pretending to be T-Rex brothers one evening as Marcus sat on the couch. As he watched the boys collaborate to tackle a massive jigsaw puzzle, he turned to Sarah, who was enjoying her tea beside him. "They're amazing together," he said softly. "It's as if they were always together." Sarah smiled brightly, even with a hint of mystery in her eyes. "Resilient," she said. "More than we often recognize." Sarah, Marcus began, with a hint of excitement. "I want to do more, not just for Jake and Elliot. I understand that your journey has been challenging, and I'm here to support you." Sarah's brow furrowed as she set her tea down on the coffee table and said, "Marcus, I appreciate your kindness, but I don't need charity." "Charity," he said quickly. "It's making sense. I've spent years focused on my career. I thought I had everything figured out, but I realize how much I miss you, Jake. You mean so much to me. I'm eager to contribute to this in any way possible." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. Looking into his face and considering what might occur if you become occupied again. "If work takes the lead. And you won't forget about any of this," Marcus said with determination. "I've already begun. I've embraced a new approach at work by delegating more to my team and freeing up my weekends." Going to disappear, Sarah, not this time. She studied him for a long moment before. "I'm really hopeful that Jake will be okay. He deserves support and guidance in his life. Marcus, if you're going to step into that role, you need to be confident." "I am," he said. "I'm excited to step in for Jake and truly want to make this work for all of us. I see the potential in what we can achieve together." This alone for too long, Sarah's expression softened, and a glimmer of hope shone in her eyes. "It's going to." She encouraged me to take the time to trust that this is a meaningful journey. "And I completely understand," Marcus said. "I'm not going anywhere." The next weekend, Marcus invited Sarah and Jake to join him and Elliot for a trip to the zoo. It was a perfect day, sunny but not too warm, with a refreshing coolness in the air. The breeze danced through the air as the boys raced ahead, their excitement overflowing as they eagerly pulled their parents along. At the lion enclosure, they eagerly pressed their faces to the glass, roaring in unison and drawing amused smiles all around. From onlookers, Marcus caught a glimpse of the wonderful possibilities that a blended family can bring. Might seem like it wasn't perfect and there were still hurdles to overcome, but it felt right as they sat together at the picnic table. Everyone shared sandwiches and laughed at Jake's hilarious impression of a monkey. Marcus caught Sarah's eye, and she smiled, a real genuine smile that filled his chest with warmth. By the end of the day, when Jake and Elliot peacefully drifted off in the car on the way home, Marcus experienced a wonderful feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. He glanced at Sarah, who sat quietly in the passenger seat, her face radiating calm, gentle in the warmth of the setting sun. "Thank you," he said, filling the quiet with his words. "For giving me this chance." Sarah looked at him, her expression filled with contemplation. "Let's make the most of it, Marcus." "I know," he promised. And this time he really means it. Believed they were creating something delicate yet brimming with potential, and he was ready to fight for it. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus found himself embracing a new rhythm, one that focused more on playdates, bedtime stories, and cherished moments rather than boardrooms and corporate meetings, spent watching Jake and Elliot joyfully discover their shared world for years. Marcus's life had been shaped by his relentless drive for success, but now the concept of balance felt wonderfully attainable. The concept was essential. And while the shift took time and presented challenges, it was a journey worth embarking on. Letting go of the habits and routines that had defined him for so long felt like uncharted territory. But every time he heard Elliot's laughter mingling with Jackie's or caught a glimpse of Sarah's cautious smile, it brought a sense of warmth and joy. It further solidified his decision. One evening after putting Elliot to bed, Marcus found himself gazing at the framed photo on his desk. It was one of the few personal items in his otherwise minimalist home office. The picture showed a younger Marcus, full of life and energy. He felt a sense of pride standing in front of the Langford Enterprises logo on the day he officially took over as CEO. Has always served as a reminder of his achievements. Yet now it feels like a chapter that, while significant, is part of a journey that continues to unfold. With the man he was becoming, later that week, Marcus called a meeting with his executive team. The announcement was exciting, simple yet resolute. He was reducing his daily engagement in the company. He presented it as a shift to prioritize strategic oversight. But the reality was that his family needed him more than ever. For the first time in years, Marcus experienced a wonderful sense of clarity about his business. Priorities shifted, and the change extended beyond his professional life. Marcus also embraced transformation. His focus on Sarah and Jake was commendable as he sought ways to provide them with support while respecting their boundaries. He understood Sarah's needs well. Independence was important to her. She had made that clear during their conversations, but that didn't mean she. One day he visited the cafe where Sarah worked, feeling hopeful about the possibilities ahead. With a bright idea blossoming in his mind, he eagerly waited for her shift to end before approaching her. With a sense of purpose, Sarah began. "I've been thinking about how much you've accomplished on your own, but I'm excited to help make things easier for you and Jake." She smiled slightly, uncrossing her arms. Marcus, I truly appreciate your thoughtfulness, but I'm in a position where I don't require assistance. It's not about receiving help. He said gently to view it as an investment in Jake and Elliot, and in the wonderful life we're creating together. I'm not trying to take over, Sarah. I just want to give you some breathing room. She hesitated, clearly torn. But Marcus could see the potential for a positive outcome. The conflict in her eyes, the part of her that wanted to accept his help, dancing with the part that was fiercely independent at last. She sighed. What do you have in mind? I've been exploring options. There are some exciting options. Marcus mentioned that if you're open to it, I could help you start your own. Business could be an exciting opportunity, especially if it involves something you're passionate about, like art. Sarah blinked, clearly surprised. You did that? Of course, Marcus said. You absolutely deserve to pursue your dreams, Sarah. You've dedicated so much time to supporting Jake, and that's truly admirable. But now it's a wonderful opportunity to consider what you desire as well. She glanced down at her, fingers twisting together. I don't know, Marcus, it feels different. Different is exciting. He said gently, you don't have to decide right now. Just take your time to think about it. Relief washed over Sarah as she nodded, her expression thoughtful yet hopeful. It was a start. And Marcus was eager to support her. All the time she needed as the weeks went on, Marcus also put in a dedicated effort. The journey to rebuild trust with Sarah was filled with challenges. Yet it held great potential for growth and understanding. Wasn't impossible. Gradually unfolding through late-night conversations and serene moments spent watching the boys play as they start to confront the challenges of their past. One evening while the boys were engrossed in a movie, Marcus and Sarah found themselves sitting on the back porch of her apartment, enjoying the delightful summer air. It was warm, and the distant sounds of the city created a soothing backdrop. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked suddenly. With a voice barely above a whisper, Sarah looked at him, her brow furrowing with a sense of hope for what could be. What letting me go? He said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Do you ever wonder how things would have turned out if we'd stayed together? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her tone was reflective. And she mentioned that she thinks about it occasionally, but she remains unconvinced. It's a journey of growth. We were different people back then, Marcus. You were so dedicated to building your career. I was on a journey to discover my true self, and Marcus mentioned his own experiences too. Voice filled with reflection, I didn't appreciate what I had until it was gone. You weren't selfish, Sarah said softly. We were just exploring our own worlds, and perhaps I was too. We were young. Marcus and they were figuring out how to hold on to each other while pursuing their dreams. He nodded, her words resonating deeply with him. Do you? She smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes despite the hint of sadness. Perhaps it was our journey that brought us to this wonderful place we find ourselves in now. Where we are now, Marcus repeated, letting the words sink in. Do you think it's exciting? Enough. Sarah looked at him, her gaze steady. It's a start. So simple. The statement held more significance than Marcus had expected. It wasn't quite forgiveness, but it was certainly a glimmer of hope, and that was enough for him. In the months that followed, Marcus continued to embrace his role as a father while also pursuing his other passions. Efforts to support Sarah led to her drafting a business plan for a small art studio where she could teach classes, and selling her own work were a gradual journey, but the excitement in her eyes every time they talked about it was truly inspiring. Reminded him of the great value it held. While Jake and Elliot continued to flourish, their bond blossomed with each passing day. Their laughter and shared adventures filling Marcus' home with a delightful warmth. He didn't notice his absence because the joyful moments far surpassed the challenges. One evening, as Marcus tucked Elliot into bed, his son looked up at him with sleepy eyes and said, Dad, Elliot, murmured as Jake. My brother. Marcus paused for a moment, pleasantly surprised by He had been preparing for this conversation, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. Why do you ask, buddy? Marcus asked gently, and Elliot shrugged, his gaze drifting toward the ceiling. It feels like my brother has always been a part of our family, Marcus. He smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. He is Elliot, he said softly. Jake is my brother, and he always will be. Elliot's face lit up with a drowsy smile, and I knew. He whispered before drifting off to sleep as Marcus sat there, filled with warmth, watching him. His son's peaceful expression filled him with a deep sense of gratitude. Life was truly wonderful. From perfect, but it was full of possibilities, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was perfectly aligned with his purpose in the weeks that followed Elliot's quiet, sleepy declaration tea. Jake sensed that his brother was taking gentle strides toward a truth that was ready to be revealed, and Marcus was right there with him. Sarah had agreed to tell the boys together, thoughtfully planning how to share the news in a way that felt natural and uplifting. Both of them were determined to ensure that the revelation felt manageable, and they understood the importance of their approach to this situation. The moment would set the tone for everything that came next. The day arrived sooner than either of them had anticipated. What a delightful sunny afternoon with the boys joyfully playing in Sarah's living room. Marcus and Sarah invited them to sit down. Together, the sunlight streaming through the window cast a warm glow across the room, reflecting the beautiful emotions they felt. Marcus began, his voice calm but firm, expressing his hope to foster boys, as there's something special about this journey. It's great that we want to share with you. Elliot looked up, their faces filled with curiosity. Unbothered. They had grown so comfortable with each other that the idea of being brothers had likely already blossomed. In their minds, you might have noticed just how much you two resemble each other, Sarah added. Her tone was gentle, and the boys nodded as they realized how many things they shared in common. With enthusiasm, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Marcus continued, glancing at Sarah for reassurance. That's because you are brothers. In fact, you truly are twins. There was a pause as the boys took in the exciting news, their wide eyes sparkling as they darted between their parents and each other. Other than as if on cue, their faces lit up with identical grins. Twins? Jake asked. His voice was filled with wonder. As if we had been born together, just as Sarah said. Smiling even with the tears glistening in her eyes, you share the same special day. And you're a part of each other in a truly special way. Cool, Elliot exclaimed, leaning toward Jake. I felt a strong bond between us. I reminded him, and he nodded in agreement. Absolutely. The best twin brothers, embracing the simplicity of their joy, made Marcus's chest tighten. He was filled with a sense of anticipation and curiosity. There was excitement, perhaps even questions they weren't quite prepared to tackle. But the boys' happiness and acceptance shone brightly. He could have dreamed big as Jake, and Elliot eagerly dove into their exciting plans for all the adventures they would share as twins. Their imagination soared as they eagerly talked over each other. And that moment truly strengthened their bond that had been blossoming between them, and from then on they joyfully embraced their new identity as twins with unrestrained enthusiasm. When their birthday approached just a few weeks later, Marcus and Sarah were filled with excitement and decided to celebrate it as a family. A wonderful beginning for everyone. The party took place at Marcus's house, full of energy and excitement. A vibrant celebration brimming with balloons, streamers, and the joyful laughter of two boys who truly felt a sense of belonging. A towering cake sat at the center of the table, beautifully decorated with dinosaurs, celebrating their special day. Shared fascination and the words "Joyful Birthday, Jake" and Elliot scrawled across it, and bright icing. The boys joyfully tore through their presents with cheerful abandon. Their excitement was infectious, as they discovered matching t-shirts that read Twin A and Twin B, which they immediately embraced, put on before racing back outside to continue their games. While Marcus stood, watching them from the porch, he felt a hand rest lightly on his arm. He turned to see Sarah beside him, her expression bright and inviting. Soft. They're happy, she said, her voice quiet yet brimming with emotion. They are, Marcus agreed, his gaze fixed on the boys. And so did I. Sarah smiled, radiating warmth. In her eyes, a spark that hadn't been there before. You've accomplished so much to bring this all together, Marcus. I had my doubts. But look at what you've achieved. Could, if I'm being honest, but you've shown me a different perspective. Marcus met her gaze, his heart swelled at her words. I couldn't have done it without you, he said. Honestly, this is just as much your achievement as it is mine. The day wrapped up wonderfully with the boys fast asleep in Elliot's room. Their matching shirts slightly askew and their faces peaceful. Marcus and Sarah stayed up a little longer, sitting in the kitchen with cups of tea, chatting about how far they had come and the exciting journey ahead of them. They set off from here, embracing the journey ahead. It wasn't a flawless path, but it was one they were dedicated to navigating together. A week later, the family decided to return to the park where it had all started. It was fitting, Marcus thought, to close the loop in that special place. Where the first spark of recognition had ignited, the park was bustling with vibrant activity. Children joyfully running, dogs happily barking, and the occasional kite soaring through the bright blue sky. Jake and Elliot raced ahead, their laughter ringing out joyfully as they made their way to the jungle gym with Marcus and Sarah. Followed at a slower pace, their steps easy and unhurried, they found a lovely spot under the same tree where Sarah had joyfully sat that first day, spreading out a picnic blanket and unpacking delicious sandwiches and snacks. The boys joyfully returned now and then, snatching bites of food before eagerly dashing off once more to explore as the sun began to set lower in the sky, painting everything in hues of gold and orange. The family joyfully gathered on the blanket. Jake and Elliot leaned against Marcus, their energy finally beginning to wane, while Sarah sat beside him, her eyes sparkling with excitement. In a moment of pure contentment, everything was still. The chaos of the world faded away, leaving just them, a family. Unconventional yet complete. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. Every time Marcus turned to her, his hand brushed against hers lightly. "Thank you," he replied. "Giving me this chance." Jake and Elliot stirred their voices sleepy but determined as they mumbled about their plans for the next day. Marcus smiled, with hearts full. The journey that had brought them here was unexpected and challenging, yet it had also been incredibly rewarding. Every step brought a sense of wonder as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky. Marcus looked at his family, his sons, their mother, and the life they were building together. It was a journey filled with unexpected joys and possibilities. Was better than anything he could have imagined, and as laughter and love filled the cool night air, he felt a deep sense of joy that this is just the start of an incredible story as the sun sets on this. In this heartwarming story, we see that family transcends our beginnings. It's all about the connections we choose to nurture, and the love we create together. For Marcus, Sarah, Jake, and Elliot, their journey was filled with exciting twists, meaningful sacrifices, and wonderful second chances, but it led them to a wonderful space of healing, togetherness, and bright possibilities ahead. This story truly touched your heart. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and uplifting stories. And share this with someone who might appreciate a little reminder of the strength of family. What are your thoughts on Jake and Elliot's incredible journey? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. We can't wait to see you in the next video.